The New Orleans Saints are riding high with a lot of riz, but Jameis Winston is on his way to try to spoil it all. But the New Orleans Saints, of course, would love to spoil his homecoming. We got all that and much more on this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Saints. We're your hosts today, Jeff Lloyd from over at Locked On Browns, myself, Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints. And on this crossover Thursday episode, we're getting you ready as the Cleveland Browns are coming here to the Big Easy, and the New Orleans Saints are going to try to make it not so easy on them. We'll talk about what the things are that each of these teams needs to do to get a win, which I'm going to bet has a lot to do with both of these teams playing all four quarters, because both of them have had a little bit of trouble when it comes to that. We'll take a look at the Saints trying to limit Winston's revenge. And, of course, we'll take a look at that Browns ground game, which is going to be traveling well here to New Orleans. We appreciate you very much for being an everydayer, making us your first listen here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL so that you can get $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Jeff, Jameis Winston, the Cleveland Browns coming here to New Orleans, and I'm sure they've got a lot to prove on both sides of the football, but I'll bet they got a lot more to prove over on the offensive side of the football these days.
Yeah, I mean, when you're sitting 2-7, look, and I know a lot of people, why aren't they doing this or that? Look, nobody's really going to call it a season until you know that asterisk is next to your name and 100%. It is a season, and you don't want to start that culture. You don't want to even start, thinking that way. It leads to certainly some bad issues. But the Browns, it's interesting because, you moved on from Amari Cooper. A lot of people were aghast, and I don't get it. Once they didn't extend him, you kind of knew where it was going. Yeah. And I mean, and the thing is, it's one of the better moves Andrew Berry's made his entire time here. He got him for a fifth, had two incredible seasons, traded him for a third. They're desperately going to need all the draft help they can get this year. And in that time, you've seen an emergence from Cedric Tillman. You've seen more involvement from Jerry Jeudy. You've seen more involvement from Elijah Moore. The Browns have a lot of young receivers to evaluate. They probably do not have a true bona fide number one, on this roster for next year, but you kind of need to know who 2, 3, and 4, and 5 are. Now, also, you're starting to get some semblance of a regular offensive line. This is, it's been the weirdest thing. As everybody knows, we do our post-game shows. Some of them like to have them out for early Friday with the Browns and their injury this year. That wasn't really the case. And there were times where even I recorded after practice on Friday, and we still had no idea who was going to be the starting offensive line on Sunday. That's how bad it has been, whether it was injury, whether it was issues. Now it's there. One of the big names to watch is certainly going to be DeJuan Jones. The Browns drafted him 2 years ago to be a right tackle. Played really well last year. Got hurt. Ended up missing the rest of the season. Came back this year. Ballooned up to 4 and change. I guess it was due to not being able to rehab as much. I mean, look, he's a big guy to begin with, so any time not being able to work out, in an instance, 15 pounds can come on somebody that big. Now he's over at left. He's in better shape. He's looked good this far. And that would be a coup for them. Because, I mean, if you're going to get a guy who you drafted in the 4th round and you're going to get 2 years of a rookie salary at left tackle, I mean, that's big. But now that Nick Chubb is back, there hasn't been much success in the running game. And this is a team that basically thrived on the running game. The entire era that Nick Chubb has been here, certainly it's been the bread and butter of Coach Stefanski's time here. But you're also in this weird conundrum because you don't know how much of this offensive line is going to be here for 2025. Nick Chubb is not signed for 2025. So, you're trying to play for today, but you're also trying to evaluate all these young guys. So it's going to be interesting how they come out. They're going to come out and try and play hard, and they're going to try to go, basically, go balls to the wall. That's, the way it should be. But it's a really interesting dynamic because, you're basically playing, 2 ways. You're playing for today, but, there's certainly a lot of people who have their eyes on what's going to be for 2025.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a conversation probably reigns true for both of these teams right now. Sitting 3-5, 3-7, 2-7. Either of these teams could go either way. They could sit there and keep trying to fight, keep trying to push, or they could look ahead. I think continuing to push is the right thing to do. What I always say is you play for the players you play next to, not the players that might be here next year. Yeah, you ain't worried about that. You're worried about who's next to you right now. Yeah, the run game has been interesting. Nick Chubb come back. He's had 3 games back so far, hasn't averaged more than 3.3 yards per carry just yet, but the New Orleans Saints have been abysmal when it comes to stopping the run. So this could be the game that awakens Nick Chubb, and that would be the absolute worst case scenario for New Orleans, because they need Jameis Winston throwing the football as much as he can and all those other things. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. But the next piece that I wanted to take a look at was that Cleveland Browns defense. Now, obviously, Myles Garrett's a big part of that, but there's a couple other guys at every level that are still playing well, but are dealing with some injuries. How are things going with the Cleveland Browns defense so far?
Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about one thing that might be good for the Cleveland Browns right now, it's actually pretty healthy. Of the 53-man roster, everybody in somehow, some way took practice today. The tough one, and this is probably, because you're 2-7, it's not as tough, but Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who's really just become a star for this team, the neck, and out for 4 weeks. But it's also something the Browns are gonna have to do. They've never really put much money financially into the linebacker position. And now with JOK getting the extension, you're gonna want to see younger players like Mahmoud Diabate, who started last week, most likely will start this week. The guy's on a UDFA deal. You want to save some money if you actually did give somebody in that room some money. Rookie Bookie Watson, who ironically enough, just say that the SEC Defensive Player of the Year last year was a 3rd-day selection. It's crazy to say it, but that was the case. So he's getting some reps. The linebackers have played well. The secondary, there's been the issues. Greg Newsome and MJ Emerson have not been what they were last year. Does the bye week help this? You wonder, maybe for Greg Newsome. Greg Newsome is a name that's always been, anytime somebody said, oh, is there somebody the Browns could trade? Greg Newsome is always the name that comes into that mix. Maybe it's one of those now, okay. And it's tough for Greg. Just had his first child. You're dealing with all this. You got a baby at the house. You don't know if your lease is up because you're going to be moving. All of this going on. But now, 5th-year option is picked up. Just go out and play. And, play with nothing to lose, because essentially you do not have anything to lose. Other thing that's going to be interesting is, and we'll see where this goes. Right now, they only have 7 defensive linemen on the 53-man roster. 7. Oh, wow. That is a very, very light number. So Darius Smith certainly was moved on. Quentin Jefferson was released, went back to Buffalo. But, you're going to get to see rookie Mike Hall, who missed a lot of the early season with his off-field issues. Here's an interesting player. He's actually been playing some edge, which, hey, this guy said that maybe that was something he athletically could do in nickel and dime situations when we were doing the draft talk last year. And they have started to done that. Second-year player Isaiah McGuire is going to get real serious amount of reps at one of the DN positions. Right now, he's one of 3 DNs on the roster until they bring up somebody from the 53-man roster. So you want to look at these guys, everybody, first round pick, second round pick. Look, your roster is extremely important when you're talking your top 10 players. But a lot of times, and the reason your team wins games or does not win games comes down to maybe the guys who are 35 through 53. And when they do get whatever limited opportunity they get, can they capitalize? So look, as much as I'd rather be in, look, I saw today, I think there's 3 games this weekend that have teams with 7 wins playing against each other. Well, we'll be the December 10th ball game of that, the one that kicks off before you realize ball season even started. But you got to look for what you're going to look for. And, I want to see the development of these young kids. The Browns did like a reverse Buffalo Bills. They brought in all these veterans and then, wait a minute, we're not good. So you might as well just move on from the veterans, and now we'll play the kids. Now they have no choice. There's no reason to basically, stop and derail the growth process of these guys right now. This is what you're looking for. And look, can these guys, take bigger pieces of the pie in 2025? And then that'll set you up, obviously, for free agency, for the draft, where the Browns will be looking at most likely 11 selections. So there's a lot to do here. And look, I believe Kevin Stefanski wholeheartedly. There is no tank in this guy. He wants to win each and every week. And looking at the way the draft looks right now, Shedeur Sanders really, really intrigues me, but it's going to be a real tough deal to sell your team, your franchise to Pop. It's going to be tough to sell your team to Prime.
Yeah, big time. He already said, too, he'll step in if he feels like the wrong team.
He'll start a team. You never know what they are.
Yeah, right. You never know which way that's going to go. And it just to catch up some Locked On Saints listeners, because we were watching for this before, too, but Denzel Ward back at practice, everything good there as well.
It was weird now, because everybody was so much was made of it. It was, I think it was 6th documented concussion. He played the next week. But still, you hear a number like that. That is a very staggering number.
Yeah, for sure. And the Saints dealing with something very similar right now.
Chris Olave
is in 4 concussions. So we get it 100% over here as well. The idea of being cautious. All right, coming up next, let's take a look at the New Orleans Saints side of things. The Saints are going to try to keep at least one revenge game from not going against their way here this season. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with this Locked On Browns, Locked On Saints crossover Thursday, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College is doing some work to make sure that you've got access to education in a way that maybe you didn't have access to it before, right? When's the last time you really sat down and learned something new? Well, Hillsdale is giving you the ability to be able to do that with over 40 free, that's right, free classes online. Some of those courses include Shakespeare. You want to learn more about The Tempest and Hamlet. You can go into logic and mathematics. There's principles of chemistry and much more as well. You can go and check it out. They have a catalog online where you can see everything that they have to offer. That comes down to readings and quizzes, discussions, and then, of course, you can just sit back and enjoy the lectures as well. You come to Locked On Browns, you come to Locked On Saints, become a smarter Browns and Saints fan. Maybe you want to take a look at your opportunity to be able to check something else out afterwards, become smarter somewhere else as well. And Hillsdale is giving you the democratized look and the ability to be able to check that out. So go right now to hillsdale.edu/locked on to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked on to register. Hillsdale.edu/locked on. Today's episode also brought to you by friends over at FanDuel. Right now, have the New Orleans Saints favored 1.5 at home, getting that 3-point home field advantage there from Vegas. Kind of interesting. I think many Saints fans didn't expect to be favored again at all this season, but that's the power of Darren Rizzi after the head coaching change there. The Saints get a little bit of that interim head coach bump. Can they make it more than one game? Well, that's exactly what you can get in on over at FanDuel today, because right now, new customers put $5 down, get $150 in bonus bets back if you win. That's you can check out the FanDuel Sportsbook app where you can place live bets. You can see the latest stats, play-by-play, all in the same place where you place your bets as well. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, continuing on with this crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Browns and Locked On Saints. We took a look at some of the things going on with the Cleveland Browns over on the offensive and defensive side, getting healthier on both sides of the football there, trying to get their run game going, hopefully get that second and third corner kind of conversation to push forward there. And those are things that the New Orleans Saints as a whole are on the opposite side of the spectrum of. They're trying to keep those things from happening. So I want to start off with the Saints offense, Jeff, just taking a look at kind of the Saints defense, taking a look at kind of like where they can win this game. Last week was the first time this season on 4 different attempts that the Saints defense was on the field with a single score lead and actually closed the game out and ended up sealing a victory. It was a big moment for them. And that was after they fired the defensive guru that was Dennis Allen and kind of got that, emotional bump from the coaching change. The Saints are going to need something like that again, because I don't think this is going to be a blowout in either direction. Instead, I think this is going to be a hard-fought game. And a big part of that is going to be what Jameis Winston brings to town. Now, I'll tell you, from the moment that Jameis signed over in Cleveland, I knew that at least by week 11, he would be the starting quarterback because he was going to be coming here to New Orleans. So, of course, that was going to happen. You know what I mean? They've already seen Zach Bond, former linebacker with the Philadelphia Eagles. They've seen Lonnie Johnson Jr. with the Carolina Panthers and others. And in each of those cases, they've lost those games. This is the one where they hope to win. And they have an opportunity here, but a big thing that they've got to do is force Jameis to make the first mistake. That's going to be the big thing. They got to force him to make the first mistake and then hope that the faucet stays running after that. We've seen Jameis navigate adversity. We've seen him crumble to adversity. You just got to put him in that situation and see which version comes out of it all. But to me, one of the biggest things that allows them to be able to do that is to eliminate that run game that you were talking about with Nick Chubb. Because if they can run the ball and he plays comfortable, they're not going to be able to force him into those bad decisions or bad habits.
Well, and the thing with Jameis, and the first start technically certainly was the Baltimore game, and
right.
Look, their secondary certainly has their own issues. But the thing is Jameis was making the throws that everybody was screaming at their television for weeks for Deshaun. Throw it. And the thing I've said about Kevin Stefanski since he's been here is there's just don't pressure vertically enough. This is the NFL. You have to open it up, even if you don't hit him. It is still imperative that you try them. So they did against Baltimore. Well, now obviously the Chargers, much better defensive team, started dropping some guys back, started disguising coverages a little bit, because now there actually was film on Jameis Winston. This is always one of the greatest things about the quarterback, the backup quarterback position, is that first start they go out there and everybody's like, wow, well, why isn't he playing? Well, let's see what happens next week when they sit down and dissect some film and see what worked and what didn't, and see how they can counteract it. So certainly that, work that way. But look, Jameis himself is just, look, and you obviously know as well, just having that personality around is great. And he's one of the things that's probably keeping it somewhat together right now. Absolutely. Because there's certainly, there's got to be some division when you're 2-7. There's got to be some division, even though it's not publicly, when you have this quarterback situation and who was your starting quarterback, and it's 3 years and nothing really good as positives come from it on the field. So you need somebody who's hopefully going to keep everybody kind of in line. And you knew it was weird when he was kind of getting all the public speaking stuff and doing things, and he was really just QB number 2. But it's just the type of guy he is. But and what I said about Jameis, and in the offseason, and they didn't bring back Flacco, and nobody seems to be talking about that after today, I guess. At this point in the career, they're both kind of similar. They can either throw you into a game, or they can certainly throw you out of a game. And it's the ultimate roller coaster, and it's just a question of whether or not you like the roller coaster. Do you like the loops? Do you like the upside down? Do you like going upside down? Those are the losses. You like the straight drops. Those are the ones that you probably like. Those are your wins. But it's just, a style of play. But, you look at it, this is why these guys are here, because so many young kids, and enough of blaming the NFL. One of the bigger problems with quarterback development is college, and the fact that these kids are going to 4 and 5 schools in 4 and 5 years. So that's why these veterans are around, because they've seen enough where they're already light years ahead, because the kids that were trying to take their jobs haven't seen enough.
No, yeah, they're all getting used to having to move and change and do all this stuff before. They're not learning how to play quarterback anymore. It's it's a disappointing thing. So I think that's going to be a big thing that they're going to be looking to do. Over on the defensive side, I think what you're looking to do if you're New Orleans is get pressure with 4 and take the first read away in coverage. That's what you're trying to do in the passing game, and you're trying to limit the ground game. Those are pretty basic situations. As for the Saints over on offense, I'm with you. You have to threaten vertically. And we saw that finally come back to the Saints last week with Derek Carr and Marquez Valdez-Scantling finding their connection, a 40-yard completion down to one sideline, a 67-yard completion down to the other sideline. But here's what no one's talking about. 3 receptions, 109 yards over the course of 2 drives, and then the 2 never connected, or even a target never even went between those 2 for the rest of the game. So you've got to be able to prolong that success in some way. And everything. And so I think you got to be able to do that. Now, it doesn't have to be Derek Carr, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They can get some of these other wide receivers involved. But with their 2 wide receivers out, their 2 top wide receivers, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed out, and with the fact that you're also looking at, the ability to be able to maybe throw the football downfield to your tight ends or your running backs, that's where you're going to have to go when it comes to the situation. But you're definitely not in a situation right now to where you can sit back and then pull back on the aggression that they showed last week. I think you have to play with that aggression and get your run game going, of course, but you got to play with that aggression again this week against Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, look, you just got to battle, and look, there is no who are we. It's right. What we think we need 100%. To do today, because whatever you've been preaching for the first month, first 6 weeks, first 7 weeks, both teams are sitting here now at 3-7 and 2-7. It probably helps you that you're playing somebody whose record is so much closer to yours, because you probably feel a little more confident that you have a chance to go out and maybe compete, maybe get a win. But you just got to do what you got to do, and your one thing about the Saints defense is trying to take away the first read. Without Amari Cooper here, that is not as predictable as it used to be, because you're getting 3 different receivers involved. You are getting David Njoku involved. So, hopefully, something sank in over the bye week, and, Jameis was able to, reevaluate himself as well here, and they can just find a way, to go out there and hopefully get the ball moving here. But it should be a good one, certainly, on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. These are 2 teams that are very much interested in showing that they're still fighting, that have good leadership, all those other things. I think that's what we're going to see in this game. Coming up next, let's break down the 3 things that each of these teams needs to do to get a win here in New Orleans. We'll break that down as we continue on with this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by friends over at Prize Picks. I love Prize Picks because it's daily fantasy football made easy. It's not you versus a bunch of mystery lineups and you're just going to have to take for granted that they actually outscored you. It's you and your knowledge of your favorite teams, favorite players, favorite sports versus the house. Prize Picks is going to give you a projection for each player in a game. All you got to do is choose more or less. You think they're going to have more or less than that projection? For instance, you could look at, you could look at Nick Chubb, 59 and a half rushing yards, for instance. Let's say he's going to have more. Is he going to have less? Derek Carr, 200 or not 200? Sorry, let's say 1.5 passing touchdowns. Is he going to have more? Is he going to have less? That's it. You do that for 2 to 6 players. You get them right. You went up to 100 times your entry back. That's why I love Prize Picks. It's super easy and already over $1 billion of rewards paid out over in Prize Picks history. So go ahead and get in on it over at Prize Picks today. Download the app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's $50 instantly, win or lose, when you play your first $5 lineup by using the promo code LOCKEDONNFL at the Prize Picks app. Download Prize Picks today. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, buddy, time to take a look at the 3 things that each of these teams needs to do, the Cleveland Browns and New Orleans Saints, in order to get a win. You got Jeff Lloyd, locked on Browns, myself, Ross Jackson, locked on Saints. And, of course, we are brought to you, as all Crossover Thursdays are, by our friends over at Prize Picks. Don't forget, download that Prize Picks app and enter that promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. All right, Jeff, what are the 3 things the Browns need to do to get a win here in New Orleans?
Certainly, it's going to be offensive balance. One, it's going to keep your defense off the field a little bit. I think a lot of people thought when Nick Chubb came back, all of a sudden the run game was going to come back. It kind of showed you that it is basically a team issue between the line, between the running backs. It's just not necessarily working. It's just something you need to do here. You certainly don't want Jameis Winston going out each and every week, throwing the ball 40 times. When a roller coaster player gets that many opportunities, sometimes the roller coaster is going to go off the rails. Defensively, the Browns missed tackles last year, but the difference was there was so many more hats to the ball. So you didn't really notice the fact that maybe a tackle was missed, because guess what? Within the same 1 yard, there was another player there. Now it's a lot of guy and it's one-on-one, and it's heartbreaking missed tackles, because it's not, oh, he got another 1.5 yards. It's, we're talking 7, 8, 9, 10. And those are
sound familiar, Saints fans.
And that's when you get 10 other guys looking over and you get the hands on the head, and then you get because everybody knows how crucial and difficult it is. And the last one here. Now, look, Saints haven't had theirs yet. The Browns are just coming off of theirs. Where are you? Because most of the time when you're playing successful, you don't want the bye week. The last thing anybody wants to do is leave the building and get away. A, you're having fun. B, you're enjoying each other. You see, you're winning. When you're 2-7 and you're on the bye week, it's kind of almost like, well, all right, what are we doing in the off season? What are our plans? Is this help or does it hurt? And when you're 5 games under 500, it's really tough, because basically you're saying, well, maybe we're still alive if we go perfect, but we already went 2-7. So how do we believe we're now going to go 8-0? So that's the thing. It's a mental side of it. And when you're dealing with 53 individuals on a roster, it's certainly really difficult to see where everyone's head's at. Yeah, because this team has players like Joel Bitonio, who, hey, this could be the final 8 games ever. And then you've got, younger first and second year players where, I want to go have a career like Joel Bitonio. I'm dialed in 110%. So it's certainly going to be interesting. And look, there's a lot of clamorings, what's going on with the Browns right now, and the disappointment certainly, of where the season is at. I'm sure everybody's kind of walking on some pins and needles. So, going out there and look, 53 playing as one and looking like a, formidable franchise that knows what they're doing here over the last 8 weeks is probably the best way they can kind of close this out.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the bye week point, because it almost feels like the bye week's actually coming at the wrong time for New Orleans. Like, especially if they end up winning this game somehow, and then they string together 2 wins coming off the head coach change and all this other stuff, then you got to go to the bye week. All that momentum could potentially be gone. So you got to work really hard to kind of bridge that gap. So that's a really great observation there. I thought, honestly, going into this game with the bye week being after this game, that if the Saints hadn't fired Dennis Allen after that Carolina Panthers game, that this was going to be the game. this was going to be the one that was potentially going to be the nail in the coffin for him. But of course, we're beyond that conversation now. All right, so looking at what the New Orleans Saints need to do to get a win here, I'll echo yours a little bit. You brought up the run game and being balanced. The Saints have to limit that, right? You got to limit as best as you can when it comes to Nick Chubb. And listen, Jeff, when I say limit, I'm not even saying I'm not even talking double digits. I'm just saying not 150 yards, not 180 yards. Like, that's where the Saints have been living. The last week they gave up 180 yards, over 90 rushing yards, I believe it was, to two different backs in that game. And so you got to make sure that you're helping to limit that run game as best as you can. It's not eliminating it. It's just simply trying to damage control as best as you can. So I think doing that puts them in a situation, if they're able to produce and move the football on the opposite side, you're forcing the hand of Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns to throw the football. And then you can, any team, it doesn't even matter that it's Jameis Winston on the other side. Any team is going to have a better chance against their opposition if their opposition is throwing 30, 40 times a game. It's just high variance for mistakes, all those other things. It's not even about Jameis in that situation. I do think that you want to make sure that this team is playing all four quarters. I think we saw a great example of that last week. Even though the offense trickled down in the second half, 5 of their 6 possessions were 3 and outs in the second half. So it was really the defense that kept them in the game. But man, 2 straight plays, 2 back-to-back plays. They had the perfect play call and the perfect moment. But one player on each of those plays, they came up one player short. Taliesin Fuanga, the rookie left tackle, who's going to be matched up with Myles Garrett a lot. He climbed up to the second level, but missed a block on a second level linebacker that ended up being able to move over the top and fill a hole where there was a wide open rushing lane for a big breakaway run for Taysom Hill that would have iced that game. And in the very next play was the fade route down the left sideline of Alvin Kamara, where he just inexplicably dropped a wide open pass, called it the lamest thing he's ever done in his life in a football game. When we talked to him after the game, he was very funny about it. But it was the 111th Darren Rizzi talks about. Everybody's got to do their job. And I think that they came up short on that in some big places last week on offense. You like to see them be able to play all 4 quarters this week, so that they're not putting that defense back out there and instead icing it with the offense on the field. And then finally, just not beating yourself, right? Like, those 2 examples could have been examples that we point back to and say, well, they beat themselves because they weren't able to complete those plays. Thankfully, the defense was able to close it out. But you look at a team that has been one that has suffered self-inflicted wounds early, and that has completely set the tone for the rest of the game. They have to avoid that here against Cleveland.
It's, and it's so weird when you get games like this, because both teams could not play well. Both teams could play very well. One team, maybe not. I mean, you have no idea. And these are the most difficult games to basically kind of predict. And look, it is a little early in this week, but I think we do. Obviously, you guys are down 2 big playmakers at wide receiver. The Browns, this is who they are and basically going to be for the rest of the team, the season. It's, a couple of big names, and it's going to be a whole bunch of role players trying to create, more, for themselves. Just so to sit here and for 2 of us to try to sound like we are super educated and can tell you exactly how this game is going to go. I mean, it could be 10-9. It could be 33-32. There is no way. And the only other most recent thing you have to go off to was 2 years ago on Christmas Eve, when the game was played in about negative 37 degrees. Right. So, I mean, that's the only thing. And even in 2 years, I mean, a lot of major players have changed in that time as well. But it's, we're looking forward to it. And look, I hope you all stuck around, because Ross and I just love to chat ball. But, it's, and look, as fans, we appreciate you coming for every day, because we know you're disappointed. And, for us, I mean, we'd say, all right, well, let's try to keep everybody here and try to have as much fun as we can with it, because we all sit in the same boat, and everybody sits there at 101 and says, here we go. That's it. Maybe by 1:45 or 2:30, or 4 o'clock. But it's the joy of it. And look, you don't get the script. You never get the script for a season. You wouldn't want it anyway, because most of the time you wouldn't believe it. But it's, every season is different in every sport, and you just buckle up and you hope for the best. But could be a lot of fun on Sunday. Could be crazy. There's definitely gonna be some craziness to it. There's no doubt about that.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that. It will be an entertaining watch nonetheless, and we hope that we got you ready for it. And hey, if we didn't, don't worry, we got more. Right, Jeff and I each have a Friday episode ready for you as well, breaking everything down, getting you ready for the games. Make sure you come back to Locked On Browns and Locked On Saints for your pregame setups, all that good stuff as well. We appreciate you very much for being here with us, for being everydayers on the shows, as well as making us your first listen. For Jeff Lloyd, I am Ross Jackson. Locked On Browns, Locked On Saints. We'll see you again here soon on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.